There we go.
Yeah, I've been yelled at. That's good. Okay, I'll try share screen, Hayley, and just confirm that that's worked okay. Oh.
Yep, I can see it. Perfect.
Okay. How do I make this Zoom thing go away?
I think it might just go away. Yeah.
Will it go away?
I don't see it anymore.
Oh, it went away. That's good. There we are. Okay.
Okay.
Right, thanks. Okay, hi everyone. Hi again. Hi, I'm Robin Sloan, and welcome to this first information event where we're going to talk to you about InGAME International, which is a fairly new AHRC-funded research project, which is part of the larger InGAME cluster, and I'll unpack a little bit about that today. So firstly, just as always, when it's a funded project, I just want to give a shout out to the Arts and Humanities Research Council. That's the AHRC in the UK, which has funded this project from 2020 to 2023. Also the funder of InGAME. So today, what I want to do in this first presentation is just talk through, well, who we are, what this project is all about, and including how you can become involved if that's something you would like to do. And also our timeline, so you get a good idea about when things roughly are going to be happening. And our timelines are much shifted, as will become clear as a result of COVID, as I think a lot of projects have, both research projects and industry and commercial projects have been impacted. But I've got an up-to-date and quite locked-in timeline now that will take us through to 2023. So as I said, InGAME International is an HRC-funded project, so a shout out to the HRC again. And it's led by ourselves at Abertay University in Dundee in Scotland. But we've got a whole range of partners that we work with, primarily academic partners who we originally developed the bid with in Shanghai, which includes the Shanghai Academy of Social Science, which is the lead organization in China. But we also have industry partners that we work more closely with, including Outplay, Bino and Denki locally, as well as Perfect World in China. And obviously InGAME itself, which I'll talk about in a second. And our aim within InGAME International is to kind of develop this framework for collaboration between the UK and China, which is likely clear from the Eventbrite and the schedule that we put out there. And I'll unpack that over this presentation. So who are we? There's my face again. I like to see my face staring back at me on a slide. So as I said, I'm the principal investigator. I'm also a senior lecturer in game design here at Abertay University. A few of my colleagues are also going to be presenting today. So Martin Lynagh is a co-investigator, will be presenting later on. And Graham Johnson and Lynagh are not here today, but also co-investigators contributing to different parts of the research project over the next 3 years. Charlie Harpinger is our project coordinator, who's also here today, and you may have already spoken to. And of course, Hayley, who are actually doing the bulk of the work and should probably be first on that list rather than ourselves. Hayley Brown will be giving a talk today as well, and also Hayley Austin, who's been our compere for today, and she'll curate the chat later on. But we're all contributing to the project over the coming months and years, and we'd be really keen to hear from you if there's anything that is of particular interest to you about this project. Please reach out to any one of us. So a little bit about ourselves. Some of you will know who we are, but some may not. So I said we're based at Abertay University, and that's in Dundee, not in Aberdeen. So that's often a misconception. But Abertay is quite a small university, one of the smallest universities in Scotland and in the UK. But it's quite renowned for vocational courses and very technical courses, and that includes games degrees. So our games degrees date back to 1997. It was one of the first formal named games degrees in the world, and since then we've developed a broad games education portfolio, undergraduate, postgraduate level. I've noted there that we have been ranked in the Princeton review as one of the top universities in Europe for games education for the past 7 years, actually. And we're quite proud of our games students, but that also extends into our games research now as well. So really, as part of this project at InGAME International and part of InGAME more widely, what we're looking to do is bring partners in from the UK and China, different backgrounds, but that will involve opportunities to engage with the university as a whole, which includes our talented students. in programming and art and design, but also our facilities, including the Emergent Tech Centre, which is one of our main labs here. So InGAME International is based here in Aberdeen. We have access to these facilities and this wider community. Mentioned InGAME, you may or may not have heard of InGAME. It's one of the creative clusters funded by the HRC, which are around the UK, one of two in Scotland. And the main creative cluster that's been funded with an explicit focus on the games industry. And again, that's led by Aberdeen University, but this is a wider and larger partnership, including University of St Andrews and University of Dundee, as well as a whole range of partners from the games industry and other sectors. You can find out much more about InGAME at their website, innovationforgames.com. So what I want to talk to you today about is our project itself and what it is we're doing, what we're up to, what we've done so far, what's upcoming, and in particular, how you might want to get involved. So we're a UK-China collaboration. Our base, as I said, is in Dundee, but we are a UK-wide research project, so we're interested in connecting with everyone around the UK from the games sector and related sectors. And our mission here in our UK base is to direct this programme of R&D, which is direct support for companies, which I will come on to, but also developing relationships and engagement with partners in China and the Asian region more generally. We also have our partners in China, as I said, that we're working with, academic partners. It's an academic network we hope to grow. So we're really interested to hear from more researchers, academics, and sector representatives in China if you want to join with us. And the purpose is to grow that network to bring in new companies from the very large companies. As I said, we already work closely at Aberdeen with Perfect World, but also the smaller organizations, the smaller developers, the smaller publishers and platform holders and sector organizations. We're very keen to establish relationships with and build those connections with the UK. So I kind of alluded to what our aim is earlier on, and there is a kind of central aim for our R&D program over the next 3 years, and that's to deliver this pathway to partnership. And by that, we really just mean a plan for how we can promote and support engagement across academia and industry and across UK and China. How do we establish connections? How do we make new partners, make new relationships? And how do we make that work smoothly? That's the kind of aim of this research project. And there's a number of areas that we've started off with interests in terms of that relationship, some of which are fairly obvious, but others that we're more keen to do the kind of basic research to find out more about differences and similarities. So right away, one of the things we're interested in is the differences in regulation and legal oversight of games publishing, and there's obviously large differences between the UK and China. Both nations have their own regulations over how games are made, sold, played, and I think quite often when we're speaking to the games industry in both nations, it's one of the key things that comes up is understanding and navigating the differences in regulation. And of course, it's an evolving thing as well in both China and in the UK. In the last 12 months alone, we've seen changes in how games are being considered, particularly in relation to younger audiences and regulations for those audiences. So that's one of the things that we want to navigate through our research and provide support on. But more generally, we're also interested in the differences in market, looking at the market data and the trends and what is popular and what is likely to do well in each market, and as well as patterns of consumption. So who are the audiences for games and games-related media in both nations, and providing insight to partners on that. Beyond that, we're also actually really interested, as we are at Aberdeen University, game making university, we're really interested in how games are produced and developed. So on production, we are quite keen to learn more about differences in the makeup of game studios, game publishers, game developers, understanding their methodologies, their ways of working, in order to give greater transparency, and I guess in terms of how the games industry is set up and how it operates in both nations. And that's something we've been looking at through our early research. We're also interested in any differences in technology that may arise, whether that's software technology, development technology, use of middleware, use of hardware, application of games in different, I guess, contexts, as well as by experiences, we just mean what are the different types of games products that are doing well. So entertainment games, what are the genres, what are the types of games that are being produced and why, but also beyond that, in both the UK and in China, what are the contexts that we're seeing games media being produced that are potentially opening up new markets and new opportunities, whether that's in the greater field of applied games such as digital health, or whether that's being used in theatre or in immersive performances, immersive experiences. All these other sectors are highly dependent on the skills and knowledge of the games industry, so we're quite keen to learn more about that as well. So how are we doing this, going about trying to meet these objectives? Well, I've already alluded to this, but one of the main activities we've been engaged with for the past 6 months or so is our Scope and Inform piece of research, which some of you who are present here today will have already been involved with. But this is being led by Hayley and Hayley. So interviews, engagement with industry, with sector agencies and other representatives who have got insight into the games industry in both nations, for instance, in legal, regulatory, market knowledge, that kind of thing. And really the aim here is to try and identify what are those barriers that are either perceived or real barriers to cooperation and development for UK to China and vice versa, but also what are the opportunities, what are the potential market opportunities that companies or sector agencies have identified, but we need to find a roadmap to exploiting those opportunities. So that's been the bulk of our research so far. As we move beyond that, we're going to be looking at more applied research, particularly the design and play piece of work, which Martin will talk to in much more depth in his presentation. But this is the creation of demonstrators, or more likely better to call these prototypes, experimental prototypes that are developed either in cooperation and partnership with talented student teams, or developed in partnership with industry. And the purpose of these is to identify some of the issues from the Scope and Inform research. What are the market opportunities? What are the challenges? What are the things that we want to explore or test? And to actually carry out applied practical research by building prototypes that will explore those issues. It's also an opportunity to explore co-production. So we're really keen to involve partners, games companies or others from both UK and China who'd really like to partner up and engage with co-production, because that allows us to explore co-productive processes, differences in design thinking, differences in development practices and methodologies and what have you. So that's a big piece of research, and we're really keen to hear from people about that. Beyond that, particularly into years 2 and 3 of the project, we're looking to provide much more tailored and responsive support to industry and related sectors through events, such as the first event that we had this week, which Hayley Austin ran, which was part of the Women in Games Festival. So running a series of events in support of partners that can explore particular topics or themes or challenges, but also we'll be looking forward to support in partnership with other sector agencies and other organizations, investor forums, support for companies to seek investment and partner up with publishers, and also going forward beyond that, more responsive R&D. So as part of InGAME, they have a collaborative R&D program, which we are also part of, and that we'll publish more information about that later on in this year, towards the end of 2021. But the purpose of that will be to provide companies, organizations, an opportunity to apply to work with us on a particular set problem that they may want to investigate. So that program of foster and support research will gradually unfold over the coming months. And towards the end of the project, what we're really looking to do is capture all this information and this knowledge and formalize it into that pathway to partnership, that understanding of what are the best working practices between the UK and China for games companies and games related companies. And that will manifest itself as both in person, which we're hoping will be much more likely by 2023, in-person training and workshops and conferences, in addition to online dual language training, and also the development of new training materials for the next generation of games developers. So university level student education that will provide more insight into UK, China markets, research and practice in the games industry. In terms of who we work with, I've kind of alluded to the fact that we are obviously a games research project, and we obviously like to work with game studios of all shapes and sizes, from micros and small independent game developers through to large multinationals. We're quite keen to work with everyone, and that's in the UK and China. In addition to that, we also have an interest in esports as a related sector, which is obviously undergoing enormous growth in China and in the West. But we're also keen to engage with the esports industry, so esports companies too. We're keen to speak with in both UK and China. But I've also mentioned this throughout, is that really we don't see this as developers or publishers in isolation. You know, we're looking to engage with all related businesses in games, as well as sector representatives. And also, of course, in addition to that, researchers. So if you are working in academia as a researcher in the UK or China, or further afield, but researching, I guess, transnational practices, transnational working, and UK-China development, then of course we're looking to engage with you as well. So I'll quickly go over just some of the key things that you can engage with over the coming weeks and months if you're interested, before handing over to the next presentations. So I've mentioned design and play, and I've got an example here that I'll give a tease of, but I don't want to play for too long, because these are some of the demonstrators that Martin will talk about. But so I mentioned demonstrators and or prototypes, and the purpose of these is to afford an opportunity to test a particular idea or problem or IP exploitation issue that you would like to conduct in partnership with ourselves. And this can work with partnerships with student teams, where we can offer them assignments and they can become involved in the co-creation and co-ownership of those briefs at both undergraduate and postgraduate level. But also, as I said, we could potentially explore opportunities to do this in partnership with industry as well. We have a number of areas that we had sort of predetermined as being of interest. Of course, esports is a major one, but also applied games. So the wider field of serious games, digital health, educational games. It's obviously a huge opportunity, particularly in China, because a number of games companies have taken their games products or developed games products or adapted games products for the market in China by aiming it towards educational marketplace rather than entertainment games. So that might be of interest. And also social and performative games was an area that we identified, and we've got a demonstrator we can talk about on that later on today. We're also potentially interested in a range of different technologies, whether that's anybody who wants to explore the potential for 5G to impact on gaming, or any use of digital physical spaces, for instance. But these are all, these are all just suggested areas of collaboration. And I'll make that go away. No, there we go. So I'll get rid of that slide. But we're really happy to talk to you about anything that is of interest. If it's got a theme or a problem around UK to China or vice versa, development or market access, and we're keen to talk to you about whether a demonstrator is right for you. We're also looking to unroll the program of foster and support research, as I mentioned. So this can take the form of scoping events, such as the event I've already mentioned, the Women in Games event this week. We have ideas about types of scoping events that would be of value. We're currently looking to, for instance, look at events that could support UK companies connecting to publishers or platform holders in China, or indeed platform holders, publishers in China trying to connect with UK developers to discover new products. These kind of events seem to be of value, so we're looking to explore those, and we'll release more information about that in due course. But we're also interested in other thematic areas, particularly around things like regulation, localization, and we're quite keen to have those events led by our research, so to actually respond to industry issues and design events for industry. And that program events will be rolled out in coming months. As I mentioned, we're also going to be rolling out a program of direct support, which will involve engagement with ourselves, InGAME International, to tackle set problems, set research problems, whether that might be, for instance, assistance in trying to understand or navigate regulation barriers or localization issues, or a need to find new partners. There will be opportunities for you to kind of engage with us for more bespoke research support or development support. And again, we'll release much more information about that at the beginning of 2022, so please watch this space. There's also down the line, there's potential opportunities for funding from InGAME International for UK companies for travel to China. Again, that's something that we'll reveal more information about in 2022, but we're quite keen for that to be responsive to the needs and requirements of industry. And for obvious reasons, we've had to change how we will roll out that programme because of the impacts of COVID-19 on travel in the last 18 months. But it is something that we'll be looking to roll out in 2022 into 2023. So again, please follow us on Twitter and keep in touch with us if you want to learn more about that. Beyond that, I've also said that there'll be opportunities to engage with training and wider education. And we're also looking for people who would like to participate and contribute to these materials down the line as well. This will be more towards the middle of 2022 and into 2023. But for instance, we're looking for people who might be interested in contributing materials, for instance, participating in podcasts and videos or short interviews. It's the kind of thing that we could do and have you involved with. And that, again, that'll be in 2022 into 2023. But also the flip side of that is anyone who's interested in having their teams or their colleagues or their networks become involved in any kind of training and workshops. That will be our final stretch, will be the unrolling of that, of training, in-person training, dual language online training, and also student level learning and education, which we'll be making available in due course. So again, if you follow us, you'll be able to learn more about those as those are introduced later in 2022. So I've alluded to the kind of timings of things. This is our current timeline. It's December 2020 to November 23 is when we're looking to conduct the majority of our research and activities. So I've mentioned that we're currently inside our scope and inform period where Hayley and Hayley are actually conducting most of this research and trying to determine what those challenges, those opportunities, and also those barriers are to cooperation. But we're also going through our period of design and play prototyping. So we've had our thematic pilots, which Martin will talk about. We've had UK industry pilots with students recently as well, and currently about to start another one shortly. There's co-production with an industry partner, which I'll talk about later on today. But really, we're looking towards that January 2022, and then roughly sort of May, June 2022, where there's going to be opportunities to run briefs that may be of interest to your company or your networks. And those are the kind of things we're looking to hear about pretty soon, so we can help shape those briefs in advance of those projects starting. And just so you can see where we are, that very first cross is where we are, and the unraveling, I guess, of unraveling is the wrong word, the unrolling, if you like, of our events over the next 12 months in particular, including in industry engagement events, and then ultimately our R&D support and investor forums down the line, and ultimately, as I said, mid-22 through to the end of the project, the end of 2023, we'll be focusing much more on that, feeding back into industry and related sectors by providing training and workshops. So that's a kind of a whistle-stop tour of our project. If you do want to get in touch with me as the principal investigator, you can drop me an email, or you can contact Charlie, who's the project coordinator, if there's anything you need to know. Charlie can also provide any support in Mandarin if needed. But we've also got a website and Twitter there. So I'll stop at this point, and like I said, we can take questions at the end if there's anything you want to ask about this. But at this point, I'll hand back over to Hayley.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Robin. So a silent virtual round of applause. Golf claps. Thank you. Thank you very much. So yeah, as Robin said, we'll be taking questions at the end, but feel free to write them down so that you remember any of the questions you have. But for now, I will relay over to my work better half, Hayley Brown, who is going to discuss some of the research that's been done into regulation and localization in China. So Hayley, take it away.
Okay, just share my screen.
I just see the background. There we go.
That should be it. Yep.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, so hi there. For anybody who hasn't met me, I'm Hayley Brown. I'm one of the Research and Development Fellows at the InGAME International team. And for anyone who's thinking about publishing a game in China, I'm going to talk about regulation and localization. So first up, I'm going to look at the barriers, so mostly focusing on regulation and access restrictions in China I'm going to look at considerations for localising and adapting game content to meet the preferences of consumers in China, and I'm going to have a quick look at opportunities in the market and opportunities for connecting with Chinese companies. So I'm going to draw upon the written rules which have been published in English by both Pillar Legal in the US and also App in China. Also, I'm going to draw upon some of the information gathered from conducting interviews with experts in China and the UK. So jumping into the regulatory restrictions, all games being published in China must go through a licensing and approval process with the National Press and Publication Administration, or the NPPA. The first part of this process is to apply for a software copyright certificate, which is proof of registered Chinese copyright for any piece of software. The game will then need to be submitted to the NPPA for approval to obtain a publishing license and ISBN. So according to the law in China, foreign companies are actually not permitted to directly publish or operate online games within the country. So because of this, the only legally permitted way for UK developers to enter China's domestic game market is to find a Chinese partner who can register and publish the game on their behalf. So to go through the approval process, developers are asked to provide extensive information about their game, and it can be quite a lengthy process. So I've heard from one source that it can take anywhere between 2 months and 2 years to go through the process. To speed up the game launch, some Chinese publishers might suggest that foreign game developers allow them to register the game copyright in China under their name. So some advice from Pillar Legal around that is if you do decide to do that, it can be quite difficult to enforce contractual obligations for the publisher to transfer the copyright registration back to the developer again. So that situation might result in confusion over who the actual owner of the game is. So unfortunately, there are no guarantees for getting a publication license, and even the dominant domestic games companies like Tencent and NetEase don't get 100% of their games approved. Something else that's completely different about the system in China is that there's no age ratings on games like we have in the UK. So all content published in China must be suitable for people of all ages. So partly for that reason, all game content and graphics are quite heavily regulated. So first up, we need to avoid anything which opposes the principles established by the Constitution, such as slandering the military, the government or leadership, anything which distorts historical facts about modern or historical China, and anything which might paint China or Chinese culture in a bad light. So most of these rules would really only impact your development if China was one of the locations within your game. And if that is the case, you would want to certainly do a bit of research and also work quite closely with your publisher. Territorial integrity is something which is taken quite seriously by the Chinese government. So avoid anything which endangers national unity, sovereignty and territorial integrity by misrepresenting Taiwan, Hong Kong, the South China Sea and China's established borders in real or fictitious maps. So if you are including any Chinese locations in your game world, or even if you're planning to include any maps at all which show China, even if it's just for a couple of seconds, these would need to be compliant with the border treaties by the People's Republic of China. Also, if you're creating a multiplayer game where players can generate their own content or make alterations to the terrain, this might actually have a bit of difficulty passing regulation. There have been cases where players have used these types of games to make political statements. So one example that I've got here, which you might have heard of, is Animal Crossing New Horizons, which was banned in China last year. So players were using the map modification features and also the pattern editor to stage virtual protests in support of Hong Kong's pro-democracy movement. Another point of contention flags. So it's recommended that you avoid showing any flags, particularly flags of Taiwan or Hong Kong. And that includes in the player location screen in your interface. Also important to avoid any content which promotes violence, terror and cruelty. So skeletons as well should be avoided. Vampires, blood of any colour shouldn't be shown. And if you have a character which is sustaining damage in the game, you shouldn't show any exposed bones at all. Also no corpses. So when a player is killed, it should simply disappear. So I've got an example here. You might recognise this example. So PUBG was actually shut down in China after the government refused to issue a licence. And not that long after, a very similar replacement called Game for Peace was published. And in this version, players just give a wave as they die and then they disappear. Also, words around any of these topics such as kill and death and also ghosts should be avoided, as well as any scenes or images which might be considered too scary. Any content which promotes a corrupt lifestyle should be avoided, as well as anything which promotes violations of law and crime, particularly anything which involves minors and criminal organisations. Also, promotion of drugs and the use of power or money for personal gain. Traditional family values are important in China, so avoid anything which might be considered to endanger social morality or which propagates obscenity. So avoid using any vulgar words or any depictions of pornography, nudity, adultery or explicit sexual content. Also anything which encourages minors to get married or live together. So if you do have an in-game marriage system, minors shouldn't be able to access this. So an example of a game which was banned for including this type of content is The Sims. So The Sims encourages characters to engage in romantic and physical relationships, and also encourages characters to get married. So probably on quite a few different levels, there's things in this game that might not pass regulation in China and probably wouldn't get a license. Also, there have been quite a number of games which have been banned in China due to overly sexualized female characters. There's also a significant regulation around the use of loot boxes now. So real currency can't be used to purchase loot boxes, so players must be able to acquire them through other means. Also, developers must disclose the odds for individual items appearing in loot boxes, and there's a limit to how many loot boxes a player can open in one day. Just a few technical things which need to be in place prior to submitting a game. So you need to have the healthy game text, which must display before the game starts. Also, there needs to be a real name verification system where players register using their ID numbers. If a player is identified as a minor from their ID, this actually limits the amount of time that they can play for. So you possibly saw just a few weeks ago on the news that there was new regulations which were passed to reduce the time limit for minors down to only 3 hours per week. Also, there's a limit to in-game spending for minors. If your games allow players to communicate either through voice or messaging, you do need to submit a plan for how you're going to moderate this. The game will also need to be hosted on servers in China due to the firewall, and also keep in mind that many of the services that we are quite used to using in the West might be blocked. So this includes things like Google, which I think most of us rely on quite a lot. So services including Google Maps, Google Play, quite a few of our social media services as well, such as Facebook and YouTube. So for your game to function properly, you'll need to utilise services that work within China. So we'll just take a quick look at the process of localisation. So all text needs to be in simplified Chinese. This is something you're going to have an easier time doing if you've managed to avoid baking any text into any of the art assets, which is always a temptation. So your Chinese partner might take care of the translation in-house, or it might be outsourced to a localization company. Usually localization teams work from a written transcript and won't have access to the game or any of the visuals, so that they can understand the context for some of the script. So there might be instances where particular scenes don't actually translate that well. So this could be just because the expert doesn't know exactly what you're trying to say, because they don't have all the information, or sometimes it just doesn't translate well from culture to culture. So one of the examples that one of the linguistics experts that I spoke to gave was the example of a rap battle, and he said that there was just no way to translate the meaning of a lot of this scene into Chinese at all. So culturally, this just didn't work. Also, he mentioned some pop culture references and humour, which didn't necessarily translate that well. So try to encourage whoever it is that's doing your localization task to communicate with you, and try and make sure that they ask questions if they're not sure. So after you get the simplified Chinese transcript back from the localization team, you need to get it working in your game. The things to consider there, if you're actually doing this process yourself. Chinese sentences are shorter, resulting in shorter text strings, and the characters are more complex. So you might need to set them to a larger point size so that the characters are clear and legible. And also consider how this different sizing is going to work within your interface, and make sure you test everything. So if you're looking for a clean, simple font to use for simplified Chinese, one option is Noto. So this is Google's answer to a font which works for almost every language, and it supports over 800 languages actually, and apparently it's free for all users. Yeah, artists usually spend quite a bit of time selecting fonts to work within the style of the game, but for working with Chinese characters, they are so different to the Latin characters that we're used to working with, so it can be quite difficult to assess if it actually works well for the expression of your brand. So it might be worthwhile, if you're looking for something stylized, just seeking advice from one of the font foundries, or possibly talking to a graphic designer in China who is used to working in that language, just to make sure it does have the intended look and feel. So it goes without saying that most UK developers will be approaching game development with a very westernised lens. Looking beyond simply translating your text, it's important to consider and have an understanding of the culture that you're developing your title for. So some developers will make considerable adaptations so that the gamers can engage with the content on a slightly deeper level, and also to avoid causing any offence. So this process is commonly referred to as culturalization. I actually recently learned that some emojis don't translate very well from culture to culture. So, for example, the clapping emoji, it supposedly has sexual connotations in China, and also the angel emoji can simplify death. Colours as well have completely different meanings, which should be considered when you're creating environments, characters, and also in your interface. So in the West, white represents purity and elegance, and it's quite often a colour used by brides, whereas in China it's considered the colour of mourning and death. Also, if there's any food items in your game, make sure it's something your players are going to be familiar with, and also something that they find desirable as well. So it'd be interesting to hear from any of the non-UK participants if they know what this food item is on the right. You can tell me later on. So another thing to consider is your character design. So who are your game heroes? Different cultures have different ideals around beauty and heroes. So consider if the characters you're creating are going to be appealing to gamers in China. So this example here is actually Temple Run. The character on the left is one of the characters that was created for the original version, and the character on the right was an additional character which was created for the Chinese version. I thought this was quite interesting because she's so stylized compared to the characters on the left. They're really quite different. So yeah, something else to consider is how your characters act, what are their mannerisms, and also what are they wearing. So China has a growing fashion industry and they've experienced huge growth in the luxury fashion market. So this could be an area where you might adapt your designs and even add some customization. Got another example here of character swaps. So Ski Safari, sorry, let's go back to that. Ski Safari is a few years old, but the developers made a number of updates, and I thought this one was quite interesting because it was actually swaps to the animal characters that they have in this game. So as well as creating different outfits for Sven, they did add a traditional Chinese outfit for him. They replaced the bear character with a panda supposedly, and replaced the penguin with a turtle. So yeah, just have a think about all of the characters that you're creating. So certain types of games will inherently require a lot less changes. So this is a game that, as far as I can tell, had little to no changes for its Chinese release. So this is Human Fall Flat. If you haven't played it, it's quite a fun, light-hearted physics-based platformer, and it was created by No Breaks, partnered with Curve Digital, and it apparently landed extremely well with players in China, and it sold over 100,000 units on TapTap within 30 minutes of launch. So TapTap is an app store. Also, it made 2.5 million sales in the first month on sale in China. So looking very briefly at monetization. So often players in China like to try out a game to see if they like it before they spend money within the game. So a couple of Western titles which changed their strategy for publishing in China were Plants vs Zombies and Monument Valley. So both of these games were paid for titles originally, but in China they published as free to play. And what they did was they updated the game design and made levels a lot more difficult to complete without spending money. So this pay to win model is generally accepted. So when I spoke to someone from one of the large publishing companies in China, he said that many players place a lot of importance on how their in-game character looks. And even if the updates don't change their performance at all, they are quite happy to spend a bit of money on character customization and vanity items, especially if they're part of a game community and if their friends are playing as well. So one potential way to connect with the culture you're creating content for is to join them celebrating big events and festivals. So I've got the example of Human Fall Flat again here. So the example on the top left is the Christmas lobby, which was created for the Western version. And on the top right, this is the Lunar lobby. So this was created for the Chinese version and for celebrating the Lunar New Year. Also, we've got Overcooked. They added some content as well for the Lunar New Year, and quite a few other games have done this also. So yeah, these holidays are times when players might take a break from work spend a bit more time gaming, and maybe also spend a bit of money on games. So taking a really quick look just at the game market. So Statista recently released a new report which shows that China ranks first among the biggest gaming markets worldwide, with over 664 million game users recorded in 2020. Something else that was quite interesting, in 2019 there was a very close to even split between male and female gamers. So 53.8% male and 46.2% female were recorded. And the number for the female gamers is actually increasing very slightly each year. Also, the age distribution of gamers, 2019 also, but the largest percentage fall within the 18 to 25-year-old category. That's followed by 26 to 36-year-olds, followed by under 18s, and then we've got the plus 37s after that. And the most popular genres in this report were supposedly RPG, followed by shooter, then casual games, action and adventure, then real-time strategy. And for art style, anime continues to be one of the most popular styles. So during the interviews myself and some of my team members have been doing over the past few months, we've spoken to Chinese publishers who have confirmed that they are searching for innovative new content to publish in their markets. We also spoke with the Department for International Trade in China, which supports British creative industries, and they informed us that there are also publishers in China looking to co-produce titles with Western development studios. So InGAME International, we're looking for to create opportunities for UK companies to connect and collaborate with companies in China. So if this is something that you're interested in finding out more about, then please get in touch, or also, as Robin said, you can follow along with the InGAME International Twitter account. I think Charlie dropped that into the chat. And we'll be posting more information about all of the events that we're organising. Also, if you have any expertise or knowledge on any of the subjects that I've covered, or if you have any questions at all, feel free to get in touch with me directly. So my email address is h.brown@abertay.ac.uk, and also I'm going to be around later on to chat to you, and if anybody has any questions. Okay, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Hayley. You also get a round of silent virtual golf claps. Yay! Very well done. That was an excellent presentation, all about that condensed so much of the research that we've done. So very, very well done.
There's a lot to go through.
Yeah.
Could have talked a lot longer on those subjects.
Yeah, definitely. So thank you very much for that. So now I will hand over to Martin, who is going to discuss 3 of the pilot case studies that were done with students with the UK-China markets in mind, and how that kind of all worked. So Martin, to you.
Thank you, Hayley. Let me just share my screen here. Okay.
There we go.
Can everybody see that? Yeah.
It's still loading for me, so there we go.
Okay. Working? Yes.
Yeah.
Good. Very good. Okay. So as Hayley mentioned, we're going to talk about the 3 pilot demonstrators that were part of our part of the design and play section of the project that Robin mentioned earlier. So, dear, excuse me. Okay, so basically we wanted to start with, we had, wanted to define our methods and our research questions. We were viewing these projects really as a kind of free hit, because they're pilots, and we hadn't, due to COVID disruption, we actually hadn't started the scope and inform, it started simultaneously rather, the scope and inform part. I think Hayley came on board in week 4 of these prototypes. That's when the guys actually started. So a lot of the research that Hayley Brown just demonstrated to you, we were still in the process of gathering. We would like to have had that at the beginning, and we will do for future iterations of this. So we want to define how UK developers should approach and design production for the Chinese market. How does regulation and policy affect what you make and who you work with, how you get that to market, cultural differences, and to really distill the key questions that UK developers have to answer around publishing in China. So we had these 3 pilot demonstrators with undergraduate student teams. These are third-year teams. It's a 40-credit module, so it's not quite full-time. It's 3 days a week or so, 3.5 days a week that the students are assigned to these. So it's a significant, across 15 weeks, that's a significant, it's like 400 hours each, teams of 8 generally. And we wanted to address each of the 3 themes that we had been briefed to do, and these were social gaming, esports, and applied games. And I'll talk about the issues around each of them and challenges and opportunities around each of them as we go through each one. So the development methodology used, we teach Agile, we teach Scrum, basically, or that's what I teach, and the development modules. Our game design and production students actually have a module with me the term before, and I go into this in some depth. The computer arts students and the programming students, they've got some exposure to it. But what we did in the first week was go through, what the guys should be doing to run Agile and to run Scrum as part of these projects. And the key elements, we pick and choose. We don't necessarily use things like velocity and all that stuff that some of you may be familiar with if you've worked in Scrum teams or ran that methodology before. We really wanted to distill the basics, so daily stand-ups, so people don't go off track, they don't go down a rabbit hole on their own. The weekly planning and retrospective meetings, these had to be done via Discord and MS Teams, obviously, because of the circumstances. And the idea really here is to get the teams into the discipline and the weekly rhythm of production, the good habit of delivering a new build every week, basically, of actually, constantly having, viewing the project as the build itself. That you can have as much documentation as you like, and we do ask for documentation, but the build itself, is the sort of the touchstone, the thing that you can, if it's not in the build, it doesn't exist. That kind of attitude. Group task estimation is another thing that we wanted them to take up, and the use of product backlog to prioritize remaining work, which is really the key to being agile, because you can cut and reprioritize features depending on client feedback, and a roadmap for longer term scheduling. So the scheduling conditions, this is the suggested schedule, a 15-week term. They submit in week 14. We wanted them to get a first, playable code up and running as early as possible. Week 5 was what we suggested. I don't think any of the teams managed that, but that is certainly what we suggested. Alpha being feature complete. You know, you could basically all the functionality is there. Our assets don't have to be final, but they have to have placeholder by week 10. And you know, beta phase, you know, beta candidate being the build in week 12, and then closing out, we'd just be fixing any class A bugs. And they have competing stuff. They have another module. They obviously have their personal submissions that they have to do. So that final week is really, you know, taken up, should be taken up with that stuff, and they should have the game in the bag by week 12. So obviously the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic meant that student studies had already been significantly disrupted in this academic year. We delayed as I mentioned, we delayed the first part of our project, the investigation of the regulatory framework, so we didn't have that basis to build on. As I said, we were, you know, seeing what we could learn from this process, looking at it as a bit of a free hit because we knew we didn't have that in place. And you know, the teams were forced to work remotely, which had mixed results. I would say, often you tended to find, I think, despite, you know, the last 2 terms of the academic year, university almost became the focus of social life because you know, the students weren't seeing each other outside of work, so that had mixed results. I think we were able to help people get through it, but at the same time, a lot of stuff that wouldn't normally come in from outside actually came into our virtual classrooms, as it were, which could make things tricky at times. So the first demonstrator we're going to talk about, the social gaming theme. So we created this in partnership with I2I, which is Isolation to Inclusion. It's funded, it's got EU funding, etc. We actually combined 2 of our briefs with other client briefs. And this called for it was looking for a solution to tackle social isolation. And their research goal was, our research goal was exploring the boundaries of legislation relating to data sharing amongst players in the UK and China. So obviously the task is social isolation with asynchronous communication, and we couldn't have direct messaging. We couldn't have text. We couldn't have anything like that. So it was a challenging brief for the team. These are the groups identified. The I2I team really wanted to focus on older people, though, and kind of subtly hinted to the student team that was the case. So basically, we were looking at the team decided to take a gardening theme, considering that older demographic. Although it's not just older people who are interested in gardening, but we thought that they thought that was a good you know, sort of theme to pick. The demonstrator created was named Budding Up, and it was developed for publication on Android. We wanted to get, you know, kids thinking of you know, the Chinese market. Very much the ubiquity of cell phones, definitely in urban areas, and you know, that older demographics when we wanted to target. Younger people might have access to PCs and consoles, but you know, cell phone access is very ubiquitous in the urban areas of China. So legislation in China imposes restriction on open text, so that was a problem. We also had problems with the team wanted to create a grid layout for your plants, and that opened up the possibility of creating symbols in that grid, so you could end up having you know, some kind of, you know, you could create a number of symbols, but we were specifically worried about, you know, swastikas, hate symbols, things of that nature. So we ended up having a bit of back and forth and discussion about how to avoid that, and they ended up with this sort of pre-placed situation. You've already seen some video of it. I've got a GIF and a couple of slides. So and this in mind, we developed the two-player asynchronous turn-based mechanic, and the design team chose emotions. It was, express how you're feeling to somebody. You would be matched with a stranger. You would express how you were feeling, and then your interlocutor would plant a garden that was representative of your feeling. All the plants had particular properties that would allow had analogues to emotions. So the English text in the game would require, the game was not localized. Large parts of it are not localizable at the moment. Some of it is. It would require further work to do that, but it could be done. So we would require a translation to simplified Chinese in order to seek a publishing approval in the Chinese market. And we think it provides a good start to an example of transnational communication that does not involve language. That's the whole basically the core of this game design. There's a little excerpt. This has both players, taking care of your plants. There's some really cute animations. For instance, the pruning of plants. We have this kind of modesty curtain goes up behind it. There's some really nice little ideas. We think the art style maybe a little bit dated. We'd look to revise that if we took it forward. But a good effort with a very, very tough brief for this team, I think. So the challenges we faced, certainly the team had a very Western-centric worldview. We had no Chinese team members. They were all European. And collectively, while they did some research, they didn't really have much of an understanding of Chinese culture. And we didn't have a Chinese partner working with us directly with the team on this, so that caused issues. That's definitely a lesson that we've learned and would look to remedy next time round. I think it's something we knew going into, to be honest, as well. Decision making, there were issues with making decisions in critical design during production. They found it difficult to commit to an idea. I don't think we really got first playable till week 8 or week 9 because of that. So there were lots of delays in production. They were a good team, but as I said, difficult circumstances. I think you can understand, what being thrown into that scary situation, etc. So these things are always going to happen, especially with student teams. There was a brief research phase. We would have liked more time, and we would have liked to provided them with more information up front as well. We certainly can't blame the students for that. And Chinese publishing regulations, there were concerns within the team. They wanted to have, there's another point there, they wanted to have LGBT representation in the game, and they were concerned about content restrictions potentially. So we had lots of conversations about that early on. Colour theory as well, as Hayley mentioned earlier. Colours having different meanings. White being more funereal, etc. So that was something the team struggled with. They did a good deal of research into it, though. I think they did okay ultimately. So testing, we weren't able to do cross-border play with Chinese players, and we had very limited play testing on this. It wasn't really a viable product until quite late in the development process, and that was mainly due to, I think, the requirement to have networking capabilities. It's a big ask of even in this turn-based format to get student teams to roll their own networking code from the ground up, and this was quite a capable team, I would say, technically. and they still struggled. They did make it in the end, and we've got something that you can play on a handset against each other. But that was a tough one for them, and it came in very late. So it wasn't really viable to test early enough, and we didn't get enough play testing done while development was in process. So we tested with a group of Chinese students who are on the improv. Basically, at the end of the development, once it was canned and we had everything submitted, it was I think a fairly mixed picture. I think there's some maybe not quite accessibility issues, but the very wordy tutorial things like that. Those are things that the students picked up on. And here are some of their thoughts. They thought, it was a good idea because it was very bite-sized. You would play for a short period of time. It's a little bit like playing multiple chess games. You could have multiple games going at once, and you could be playing with different people. Didn't enjoy the turn-based rules, but liked the theme based around non-verbal solution, or non-textual as well. Solution to communication and making contact. So our second demonstrator, these were all made simultaneously, obviously, was based on the theme of esports. Now, this was selected in our grant proposal process because it's growing significance. China is obviously a huge market for esports and is continuing to grow, with a great deal of pace. And it's government supported, etc. It is a design challenge, though, for us, because again, those networking capacities, you're not going to make an esports game. A student team is not going to make Valorant in 15 weeks. So it's a case of we had to have a creative solution. So I kind of wrote the brief for this one, and we decided to make it more of a kind of sports team management game. So it was completely offline, standalone, and the player would be managing their own esports team. There are a number of games that already do this, unsurprisingly. Even looking on the Steam China store, there were quite a few games specifically in Chinese that dealt with this kind of topic. I actually think the design that the guys came up with competed fairly well with most of these. They decided to make the tournament play into a card game. So we'd be looking at a kind of Hearthstone style game to actually resolve to tournament play. And the card game side of it, although it could have been better balanced, I think it ended up actually being quite good fun to play. Another very ambitious brief, again, perhaps too ambitious. I should have maybe been aware of that when I wrote it. And I thought this team, but despite the challenges they had, I thought they did pretty well. Esports culture, again, is synonymous with high impact visuals. Hayley Brown really helped out with this in development. She gave them advice on team branding, these kind of neons and pastels that you're seeing in the color palette. Quite high impact. It was a very pixelated GIF. So they actually did have elements of team management. They weren't particularly fleshed out, but you could train team members. You could, there was a transfer market. All those kind of things that you would expect in a fully fledged sports management game. A lot of them were just stubs, but this is just a vertical slice. So I think this team did very well under very difficult circumstances. Again, had problems with the Western worldview. This team had quite limited art resources. We had one specialist 3D artist who didn't really want to work on the 2D and side of things, on the UI side of things. We had one 2D artist as well. There was again a brief research phase, and we weren't able to give them our starter pack that the teams were going to get in the future. The team kind of, their focus was very much on, they wanted to create this city, this sort of amalgam, this analog of Beijing and London, and or Shanghai and London rather, sorry. And that really wasn't key to the game. This was, this is just window dressing. It wasn't key to the actual basic mechanics, and they focused a lot of effort on that. And they overscoped as well, which is a common problem with student teams. We tried to help with that, but sometimes people just don't listen. We had limited play testing as well. And we didn't get a chance to do it with the target audience as much. And there was an element where this team, the first team, was very well organized and followed the process to the letter. They were excellent at it. This team were much looser, and they struggled with prioritization as a result. So UI UX kind of got lost between the cracks, one might say, at points. And there was, of course, a rush at the end to implement those things, and they weren't as good as they could have been as a result. And there were some disengaged team members. There were a variety of reasons for that. There was quite a few people with resets on this team, for instance. This happened in term 2, so that's always an issue with this particular module. It was a shame, but I actually thought they did pretty well considering the circumstances that they were faced with. Much more positive feedback for this game, I think, because it's something people understand more than budding up. So we had 4 out of the 6 of our sample, which is obviously not a significant sample, but we had much more likes and neutrals and fewer dislikes and hates on this on our survey responses. So the highlights of this, lots of people complaining about the UI, and some praise of the card game. Dislike of the train part. I don't think that was fleshed out. If the team had more time, they might have done that. But to be honest, I think they should have that should just have been a stub, and they should have focused on the actual tournament play, because that was the most exciting bit. And continued.
Martin, we've only got a few minutes left, so
okay.
Could you hop on to the next one and
yes, this is the last slide on this one, so okay. I'll be through it.
Thank you.
Okay, so it's not UI appearance, etc., etc. Okay, applied games. So we partnered with University of St Andrews on this. We wanted to create their brief was to create a Rube Goldberg machine that would demonstrate basic physics. So it's something that they could give to people at open days to get people interested and studying chemistry. So basic chemistry, with obviously that physics-based gameplay. So the students actually did a really good job of creating the core gameplay. They created a 3D physics-based sandbox prototype with a scientific theme. They didn't go far enough into the chemistry side of things to really satisfy the client, but the basic game that they created was good. This is really hard from a programming point of view. To create this, it was done with Unreal Engine. It runs on Android devices. It actually runs on a mobile phone. So it's a technical achievement. I would say, and the base game engine is really good. Obviously, we've got this theme where it's in a chemistry lab, but a lot of the sort of building blocks that you use, not enough of them are chemistry themed. So again, the same issue, many of the same issues. There was very little information on educational games from Chinese educational games, something we are going to look to remedy next time we run this brief. The team kind of unfortunately got the core gameplay and then were a little bit resistant to feedback after that, because I think we thought they had enough to pass, which is unfortunate. And there was some reduced effort later on in development. Definitely onboarding issues in design. While this team had a very good technical core, for whatever reason, they weren't as strong on UI. And certainly, despite being told that this was an important thing to do, they did not put enough effort into onboarding. And there were some production and planning issues as well. But again, a decent prototype. I think technically a very strong prototype. And this one was actually very popular. Feedback on this, you know, the freedom that it gave people was really you know, brought up as a important you know, part of the enjoyment, but the lack of tutorial and onboarding was really obvious as well. So yes, one of the things, looking at it from a educational point of view, you know, one of the participants said Chinese education plays less attention to the experimental part, and they enjoyed that they were allowed to do this in a virtual environment. So yep, adding more elements and you know, better onboarding was the thing. So our project limitations, basically information from research. As I mentioned, our initial research phase was delayed. Our industry clients from China, we lacked this, and these across these three prototypes. We had Western partners, but we struggled to get cooperation at this time for these particular projects. And we didn't do enough playtesting with Chinese audiences. The teams had flat structures. This is inherent, an issue inherent in student teams. You don't have the same levers that you do in a commercial environment. So if, you know, to get people to, you know, encourage people to cooperate with the project goals. And, you know, it's difficult to capture every element of game development in a 14-week project. So, you know, monetization, the commercial side of things was left out. So we will, you know, and we will update this going forward. There'll be future results. I'm running I have just finished running another pilot with an improv team, which was 6 Chinese students out of 8, and they got very different results. And you know, we're sort of moving towards you know, achieving these goals, I think. So yeah, I mean, you know, we missed the research phase and we missed testing with the target audience. Those are things that we will definitely endeavour to improve on. And we did provide a list of the regulatory restrictions, but we will learn more about that, you know, and we will have a pack for students, you know, going forward. Further findings, you know, to do with cultural differences. An understanding of these is essential in design of your game, and you know, with co-production with Chinese students, that is you know, going to be extremely helpful going forward. And also with Chinese clients, we have, I don't think we can talk about it yet, but I think we have a Chinese client lined up that we're quite excited about for the next tranche of these. And yes, I am going to move on and let it conclude in this case to let let Robin in with his Lynn's presentation. So I just want we just quickly want to thank Ken Scott Brown, Alison Duffy, and those guys are from Abertay, and Kevin Jones from University of St Andrews for taking part in this. So thanks very much, folks.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Martin.
Okay, sorry for overrunning there.
No, that's
Cheers.
okay. We've got it. And so I'll just hand over quickly back to Robin, who's giving a brief presentation on Lynagh, who couldn't be here, on her side of the project. And after this, we will stop recording and open up for questions.
Okay, hopefully you can see my slides again. Is that okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, yeah, this will be quite brief. I just wanted to inform everyone of a current co-production project that is currently being undertaken by Lynn, who's not here today. A little bit of background on this. We were originally scheduled to start in February 2020, which was a notable month because the following month, month one of our project, of course, we were shut down. So we had to continue to rescope our project from that point on. But around about that summer, we noticed a lot of positive press around Animal Crossing, which at that point was released in both UK and available in both the UK and China. And there was a lot of questions that we were starting to ask ourselves around the social value of games. And some of the questions that we kind of noted that were of value are being noted in both the UK and China press were around the value of social play and effectively a utility within society. The games have a positive impact on players, particularly when they're in situations of lockdown or reduced social interaction. And therefore, really, could we as games researchers and game makers be doing more to push the idea of games having a positive social agenda? It's particularly prominent just now where both the UK and China, as we've kind of discovered today, and if you read the press, both the UK and China do have concerns around the opposite of that as well. So can we make a strong case for the social and positive benefits of games? So our proposition was to develop a social play game prototype that would kind of draw on our wider research context, the kind of stuff that Hayley's outlined, but also their wider research into game development, culture and consumption. And ultimately the idea of this prototype would be a demonstrator not only of how games can have a positive social play impact and social connection impact across gamers in both the UK and China, but also give us an opportunity to prototype with a UK company, a UK SME, how to, from the ground up, develop a prototype with the China audience in mind from the get-go. And that was the main proposition. We had a number of research objectives around this, which I'll just skim through, but fundamentally wanted to start off by analysing the online and mobile gaming markets in the UK and China to find out what the preferences of different players were. And then to go through a period of collaborative and co-design with our partners to develop new concepts and different concepts for games that would engage with these research questions. Ultimately to provide a new demonstrator or new game prototype that would be co-produced with our industry partner that would consider things about, you know, the impacts of physical distance, the need for social engagement, and the impacts of societal restrictions on players. And ultimately, what we're looking ahead to is evaluating that demonstrator with audiences in mind, and that's what we'll be looking to do in the coming months and into next year. So just a quick note on Lynn. Lynn's unfortunately not able to be here today, but Lynn is the co-investigator in InGAME International who's leading this piece of research with our partners, and it draws on Lynn's background and her PhD on play interventions, community play, play within communities, and fundamentally the kind of social benefits of play, not only within the kind of multiplayer, traditional multiplayer, but also, and probably even more so, ideas around how spectatorship of play and watching others play can in itself be quite meaningful and bring people together. And that's what we really wanted to push with this project. How do we do that for both UK and China audiences in mind? So I mentioned our partners, and this is really a big shout out to our main partner, which is Pocket Sized Hands. And I think Gary might be here today from Pocket Sized Hands. So he's there. I don't want to give too much away about the project, but I will give you some insight into it in a second, because really we're going to be hearing a lot more about this in the coming months, in particular as it goes towards a potential launch as a game next year. But our other partners are Yuki, who've provided invaluable insight into the interaction with the market in China and bringing Yuki games to the China market, but also some insights from Chinese developers, including one of our earlier partners, Star Painters, who were originally on the project as well. But we're expanding that out to have many more voices and stakeholders too. And of course, Lynn's leading this with Charlie's insights into her background and knowledge of living in and being immersed in Chinese culture has been hugely informative to this. And Hayley are both really critical to this project too. So here's the announcement. The game is called Play Your Cards Right, and it's actually a deck building roguelike game based around a game show where you go on double dates with a former partner. Quite a novel concept, it's quite an unusual concept, but it's also drawn on a lot of the experimental ideas and concepts that we came up with along the way, and input from stakeholders kind of led the Pocket Size Hands really leading on this research and the concept development with this novel idea that we have a good feeling is going to be of value to the cross UK and China markets, and also thinking about social impacts, which I'll talk about in a second. But some of the aims of the game are outlined here as well. And as I said, I don't want to give away too much, but if Gary's happy to talk about it later on, then we may do that. But I would certainly say watch this space and look out for more information about this game. It will be coming very soon. Just a note on the research process, because this is the kind of project that we're quite happy to talk about doing similar projects to this, if it's of interest to anyone who's here or anyone who's watching the presentations. Anything that's around developing new IP for the Chinese market or for the UK market, involving UK and China developers and participants. Our research process, as I said, was fundamentally based on co-design, so that was Pocket Size Hands working very closely with Lynn and the wider InGAME team, who provide the support on the fundamental research and the curation of the project. Insights, of course, from our partners, our named partners, but also other partners from both the UK and China have been able to come in and advise on design decisions, audience insights, also some small audience interaction in the early stages. But as I said, going forward, we're looking to a more wholesale evaluation using UK-China audiences and drawing on our partnerships to help deliver on that. So that's the kind of general research process we're following here, and we can do similar on other prototyping projects if this is of interest. On the social interaction side, I think one of the things that I think is kind of evolving is how to best do that, because there's many challenges around doing synchronous multiplayer across UK and China, even within China, and even technically within the UK. So we're increasingly looking at other ways that games are getting social traction. My feeling, and I think again this draws on Lynn's experience as well, and the kind of skills within Pocket Sized Hands, I think there's lots of value around engagement with social media, with streamers, with integration with social media and streaming platforms, with spectatorship for generating a buzz and sharing media in different ways. And I think that's largely where we're seeing opportunities increasingly emerge in China with big social media platforms, but also, of course, here in the West. And as I said, Lynn's research and her insights will, I think, will hope definitely shape this kind of ongoing design research. I've got a couple of testimonials from Gary, which I was really pleased to see, but obviously, again, he's a good person to speak to if you want to know what it's like to working as a games company in collaboration with the university. They've got a number of past projects they've already completed that have added to their portfolio, and a whole diverse range of things from virtual reality games for cultural heritage through to much more applied games technology used, for instance, here in vets and farms in the UK, so much more applied software development work. But this project in particular, I think, is bringing benefits to Pocket Sized Hands in terms of giving them more support and understanding around how to take games to market in China, how to design with the China market in mind from the get-go, which is, as I said, was one of the fundamental objectives of this, is to try and figure out what are the best ways of doing that as a game developer here in the UK. So here's another shout out to Pocket Sized Hands. Please go visit their website, follow them on Twitter. You will find more out about their game through these channels coming weeks and months. But also, again, a shout out to Lynn, who's not here today. You can contact Lynn on the email address here. And I think if you've got any questions about this, I'm happy to answer. And potentially, if Gary's still in the audience, maybe he can answer some questions as well, if there's anything he can reveal. But with that, I'd like to hand back over to Hayley to close off today's session and move on to questions and the roundtable.
Lovely. So if we can all give a virtual silent golf clap to everyone for all of the fantastic presentations. Thank you very much. That was very insightful. And I know I have questions, so I can only imagine. I think we're going to have a fantastic question and answer session. So this brings about the close of the presentation. So I'm just going to stop recording, and it should shout at everyone that I've stopped.